I don't know how long this video is going to go. I've spent 2 to 3 years researching this subject, and I have come to the conclusion that what is talked about as militia in this country, all militias are illegal in almost every state. And I was disappointed and surprised to come to that conclusion. But let me take you to article, and if you are a militia, by the way, when I came to the state, I joined the militia and began asking the question, can we do this? You know, is this legal? Show me. I sat through a couple of presentations that showed state law, which mirrored federal law, and the concept of the organized militia and unorganized militia versus the National Guard and the Standing Army. But that wasn't enough to answer the question, that is, is it legal for people to join together and call themselves a militia and act as if they are an organized military force? The answer is, if you are an oath keeper or any person who calls themselves someone who supports the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, pay attention. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16 says, Congress has the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states, respectively, the appointment of officers and the authority of training according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So no one can wake up one morning and say, I'm now going to form the XYZ militia in state A. You can't do that. You just can't do that. Now, in the beginning, we were a bunch of colonies, and we got pushed around, and a bunch of civilians joined together in militias, and with a standing army that George Washington had to find money to raise, because it couldn't be done with militia alone. And we fought off the British, and we got our independence. Now, to the British, we were traitors and insurrectionists. But whoever wins gets the right to history. So we were really freedom fighters and so forth. But to them, we were traitors and criminals. The Civil War in this country, everyone that fought under the stars and bars today is a traitor and will forever be known as a traitor. I don't care how they try to rewrite the history. Anyone who has family, and is my culture, then you have a culture of being a traitor and an insurrectionist. Why? Because you lost. It's as simple as that. The loser is always the bad guy. So, fast forward. This country, we now have a country, we have a bunch of states, and you know, we're feeling our oats, and we accept the idea of the people, the militia, the people comprising the militia, those people who will defend the country. And the reason for that is because they were terrified of having a standing army, and rightfully so. They just fought one, right? And so things went okay until 1796, and then Congress passed the Uniform Militia Act, and that remained the basic law of the militia till 1903. Now, what's important about that is that Congress passed that law because the people who were expected to be part of the militia, they had other stuff to do. They didn't show up for drills, they had other things to do. Lame, lazy, sick, and crazy happened, and nobody, but we didn't have a war. So in 1792, Congress said we're going to have to close that up a little bit. And that was the basic law until I said 1903. And there is a reason that the law changed in 1903. Right around 1812, we had another chest bumping session with the British, who pretty much were cleaning our clock for a while. And inside of that, the people who were supposed to be the militia to come and take up arms and support the country kind of didn't do that. I mean, some states said, I'm not going to Canada. I'm not going to fight the British in Canada. Let the Canadians fight their own thing. So you had militia organizations kind of doing their own thing. And you can't quite win a war against an organized enemy unless you have an organized fighting force. And if it wasn't for Andrew Jackson, who had a militia and some organized army, and I think they had like 400,000 at the end of the day, 400,000 troops finally that was put together, comprised mostly of militia, but they had been conscripted almost, so they couldn't, go do their own thing. The point is, that was a bad experience. The militia was a bad experience at the War of 1812, and so 1903, Congress changed the law again. So after 1796, we had the Mexican War and the Civil War. And the experience out of that was that there were volunteer soldiers, volunteer citizens who would then go and join the active army. But that wasn't good enough. And then in 1903, there was the Dick Act. And it was expanded in 1908, and then again amended in 1916 and 1920 and 1933. And what this basically said was, we are going to create a National Guard, which is comprised of volunteers initially. And the concept, now this is where it gets interesting, the concept of an organized militia was associated with the creation of the National Guard. Now that's been clarified. The organized militia and the unorganized militia are state-based concepts. The National Guard is, for all intents and purposes, an auxiliary of our standing army, right? But it's under the control of the governor of the state until the president nationalizes them, which would happen to go somewhere out of the state or out of the country. So at no point, especially today, can individual citizen groups create their own militia, nor can they determine their own missions, the things that they will go do. They're not even legally authorized to train as an entity called a militia. Now, I'm going to pause here and say, if you don't, I'm going to get into some of these, but there are anti-terror and anti-militia laws that states were forced or coerced into adopting into their either constitution or in their set of laws at the state level. But what happens then is that and the organized militia is age 16 to 45. And originally it was white males everywhere, but now it's most states it's the women and so forth. And there are efforts in my state to increase that age to take away the age and just say able-bodied person who is a citizen or intends to be a citizen, which I think is kind of fits the way things are today. But that would only affect the state organized militia and unorganized militia. So what does that mean? You have this body of citizens. We are still the people. We are still the people in the Second Amendment. And it is the people from which we draw those who are going to defend the country, because you will never get enough volunteers. That is never going to happen. You will never get enough National Guard. That will not happen. So at some point, and you can conscript people if you wish, but when you have people coming over the wire, it's all hands. And it's that all hands thing where we, the people, get to act. But until then, we don't. So let me come back to the organized militia. Everyone in a state is part of the unorganized militia. Everyone in that category is 16 to 45, unless your state has changed the rules. Everyone. Unorganized militia. What does that mean? You kind of, don't have to do anything. There are no training requirements. There are no expectations of what kind of weapons you need to have, uniform, none of that stuff. The unorganized militia becomes organized when the governor of the state or the president of the United States, through the governor of the state, mobilizes them, calls them to duty. And those people now become the organized militia. Why is that important? Because as long as it's the unorganized militia, the state nor the federal government has to give them any money, bullets, guns, training, anything. It's zero cost, right? Which I found very interesting. It's kind of like being in the Civil Air Patrol, The unorganized militia doesn't even get that. Doesn't even get any recognition. And if you get transitioned over to organized, you will either be under the command of officers that the state determines, not the unit of people. The state will tell you who your officers are going to be and what your mission is going to be. So that's important. Come back. At no time is it legal under the Constitution for individuals to create a militia and operate as one. So here's why wrapping yourself in a militia title is really dangerous today. There are federal and state laws against militia and paramilitary organizing and training. Those laws have been on the books for a while. So you have to ask, why hasn't there been a blitz on every organization that has the title militia in its mission statement or its title or whatever? Why haven't the attorneys general of both the United States and the states collectively gone after organizations like that? It's like some states that still have laws against having consensual sex with your partner and not being married. Those laws are still on the books somewhere. But my point with these is that, especially today, it is a very dangerous trap that people can walk into if you're not careful. Let me read what federal law says. and this is reference 10 in federal law. Federal law prohibits paramilitary training in the manufacture or transport of weapons with the knowledge or intent that they will be used to create a civil disturbance. That is really loose language. To come back to my point, that is very, very dangerous today. Look at Virginia. The Democrats in Virginia have already tried to come out with anti-training laws, basically. Federal law differs from most state laws in that when it prohibits paramilitary training, it focuses on the trainers, that's the people who conduct the class, not the people who participate. That's the federal level. At the state level, it targets both the trainer and the people who participate, which is what makes the Virginia situation so dangerous. Now, 41 states have laws that ban militias totally and or paramilitary training or both. Like I said, they operate differently. The laws aren't enforced because the backlash for doing that would be tremendous. But they're still on the books and can be used by both federal and state authorities to go and disrupt what we know as militia activities. Now, I sent a request to my state attorney general, and reporters around the country that have been trying to do stories on this have also requested a response from state's attorney general. Crickets. None of them will respond to the question, are militias legal in your state? Even though there are laws on the books, they will not publicly respond to that. And that is because it would open up a can of worms. Poof, it would open up a can of worms. So to come back to the beginning, militias and militia training are illegal everywhere. And we go in harm's way if we drape ourselves with that title. I would suggest that if people want to train together and practice certain skills, that they not do that with an association of a military unit, but that they do it as a collection of enthusiasts for shooting and training and that kind of thing. The news is desperate to classify everyone as militia. The 3%ers there is no one with a group. There is no group publicly, nationally, that is a militia, nor should they be called that. I'm an oath keeper. Oath keepers are not a militia. They don't advertise themselves as being a militia. 3%ers, depends on who you talk to. My point is, nobody should be using the title militia anywhere close to their organization. Now, I'm going to close here, but if you can find a legal opinion that counters these federal and state laws, please hit me up and let me know and everybody else. Do a video yourself if you feel like doing that. But barring any counter evidence, lose the militia title. Just lose it. Now, as always, thanks for watching. Carry on.